Dating from as early as 3000 BCE, archaeologists have found human skulls with small holes cut into them, and close examination indicates that the holes were made while the person was still alive. Many of the holes show evidence of healing, meaning that the person survived the process. The process of cutting holes into the skull of a living person is called trepanning. Although trepanning is still done today to relieve pressure of fluids on the brain, in ancient times the reason may have had more to do with releasing the demons possessing the poor victim. Ancient peoples might well have assumed that some among them who were behaving oddly were possessed by evil spirits. Hippocrates, a Greek physician during the time in which the rest of the world and even many Greeks believed in the demonic possession explanation of mental illness, challenged that belief with his assertion that illnesses of both the body and the mind were the result of imbalances in the body's vital fluids or humors. Although Hippocrates was not correct in his assumptions about the humors of the body, namely phlegm, black bile, blood, and yellow bile, his was the first recorded attempt to explain abnormal behavior as due to some biological process. Moving forward in time, people of the Middle Ages believed in spirit possession as one of cause of abnormal behavior. The treatment of choice for such maladies was a religious one, exorcism, or the formal casting out of the demon through a religious ritual. During the Renaissance, belief in demonic possession gave way to belief in witchcraft, and mentally ill persons were most likely called witches and put to death. Although there is wide disagreement about exactly how many people were hanged, burnt, stoned, or drowned as witches, some estimates place the number at around 100,000. One way to define normal and abnormal is to use a statistical definition. Frequently occurring behavior would be considered normal, and behavior that is rare would be abnormal. That kind of definition works fine with the behavior such as talking to others, as two rarer possibilities would be not talking to anyone at all and talking too much to too many persons, both of which would be considered abnormal. But what about a behavior such as happiness? Should this person who is very happy to be labeled abnormal? Statistical definitions of abnormality wouldn't work for intelligence either, as only intellectual disability or mental retardation could be considered undesirable and abnormal. People possessing a higher degree of intelligence than is normal are actually highly respected. Another way of defining abnormality is to see it as something that goes against the norms or standards of the society in which the individual lives. For example, refusing to wear clothing in a society that does not permit nudity would be seen as abnormal. But deviance from social norms is not always labeled as negative or abnormal behavior. For instance, a person who decides to become a monk and live in a monastery in the United States would be exhibiting unusual behavior, and certainly not what the society considers as standard behavior, but it wouldn't be a sign of abnormality. The situational context or the social or environmental setting of a person's behavior can also make a difference in how behavior is labeled. For example, if a man comes to a therapist complaining of people listening in on his phone conversation and spying on all his activities, the therapist's first thought might be that the man is suffering from feelings of persecution, but if the man then explains that he is in a witness protection program, the complaints take on an entirely different and quite understandable tone. Another is the subjective discomfort. One sign of abnormality is when the person experiences a great deal of subjective discomfort or emotional distress while engaging in a particular behavior. A woman who suffers from a fear of going outside her house, for example, would experience a great deal of anxiety when trying to leave home and distress over being unable to leave. However, all behavior that might be considered abnormal does not necessarily create subjective discomfort in the person committing the act. A serial killer, for example, does not experience emotional distress after taking someone's life. and some forms of disordered behavior involve showing no emotions at all. The other one is the inability to function normally. Behavior that does not allow a person to fit into a society or function normally can also be labeled abnormal. This kind of behavior is termed maladaptive, meaning that the person finds it hard to adapt into demands of the day-to-day living. Maladaptive behavior includes behavior that may initially help a person cope but has harmful and damaging effects. For example, a woman who cuts herself to relieve anxiety does experience initial relief but is harmed by the action. Maladaptive behavior is a key element in the definition of abnormality. The last one is a social-cultural perspective. What's normal in one culture may be abnormal in another culture. In the social-cultural perspective of abnormality, abnormal behavior is seen as the product of behavioral shaping within the context of family influences, and the culture within which the family and social group exists. In particular, cultural differences in abnormal behavior must be addressed when psychological professionals are attempting to assess and treat members of a culture different from that of the professional. Cultural relativity is a term that refers to the need to consider the unique characteristics of the culture in which the person with a disorder was nurtured to be able to correctly diagnose and treat their disorder. For example, in most traditional Asian cultures, mental illness is often seen as a shameful thing that brings disgrace to one's family. It may be seen as something inherited, and therefore something that would hurt the marriage chances of other family members, or it may be seen as stemming from something the family's ancestor did wrong in the past. This leads many Asian people suffering from disorders that would be labeled as depression or even schizophrenia to report bodily symptoms rather than emotional or mental ones because bodily ailments are more socially acceptable. Furthermore, there are disorders unique to specific cultures called culture-bound syndromes that are only found in particular cultures. To get a clear picture of abnormality, it is often necessary to take all the factors discussed in the preceding section into account. The first one is the behavior unusual, such as experiencing severe panic when faced a stranger or being severely depressed in the absence of any stressful life situations. Number 2. Does the behavior go against social norms? And keep in mind that social norms change over time. Number 3. Does the behavior cause the person significant subjective discomfort? Number 4. Is the behavior maladaptive or result in an inability to function? Number 5. Does the behavior cause the person to be dangerous to self or others, as in the case of someone who tries to commit suicide or who attacks other people without reason? Abnormal behavior that includes at least 2 of these 5 criteria is perhaps best classified by the term psychological disorder, which is defined as any pattern of behavior that causes people significant distress, causes them to harm themselves or others, or harms their ability to function in daily life.